27th, 2023. So that's my call to order, and roll call, please.
Yep. Chair Paris, Vice Chair, Acting Chair Kathy McLaren,
Here.
Director Bryden,
Here.
Director Calandry,
Here.
Director Jurasic,
Here.
Acting Director Knudsen,
Here.
Alternate Martin, Alternate Recca, Alternate Hogan, and Alternate Kabar. Okay, Jim Beck,
Here.
Here. Well, not quite there, but I am present for the meeting. I am on vacation in Pittsburgh, joining you remotely.
and then myself, Joshua Montoya here in the room. Arden Wells,
Here.
Maureen Riley,
Here.
Greg Harden,
Here.
and Cameron Goodman.
Here.
All right. Number 3 is the adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Or we
Oh,
need to do
never
it.
mind, excuse me, because we have one remote, so please have a voice roll call.
Okay. Chair McLaren,
Here. Yes.
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandry,
Yes.
Director Jurasic,
Yes.
and Director Nelson.
Yes.
And that passes.
Okay. Now we will go to public comments for non-agenda items. So this portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the board on any item regarding Watermaster business that is not on the agenda. Without acting or entering a dialogue with the public, board members may ask clarifying questions about topics posed by the public. Your matter may be referred to the administrator and/or advisory committee. Do we have any public comments at this time?
Chairman, I have a
Sorry.
comment, but I believe it might be it's gonna have to come under number 11. Do you want me to do it now or wait till number 11?
You would wait till number 11.
Yeah.
Okay, any other public comments?
Not seeing any online.
Okay. With that, we shall go to our consent agenda, which is A, financial report and payment of bills through August 31st, 2023. B, minutes of August 23, 2023 regular meeting. And that is our consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Chair McLaren,
Yes.
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandry,
Yes.
Director Jurasic,
Yes.
and Director Knudsen.
Yes.
And that passes.
Okay. Now we will go to number 6, which is our advisory committee report. And our advisory committee chair is Mr. Lamoureux.
Thank you. As usual, hopefully the memo is spoken for itself in your review of the agenda packet. Just a couple of things to add a little bit of flavor to. On the bills, the committee last month made a request to find out what's being done on outstanding amounts that are 90 days and older and $10,000 and more. And we haven't got that yet. We were told that they didn't have time. But I think that whittles it down to just 5 accounts in the current aging report. And then on the Williams new production, there was a question as to whether that was in Roseman Community Services District boundary. It is not. We were able to find that out. And that's all I have unless you have any questions.
Mr. Lamoureux, the memo definitely speaks for itself, but I would fully anticipate being called back up to get a little more clarity on a few issues coming up today.
Okay, that won't cost you a dime.
I appreciate it. Let's get in the spirit.
Follow up as well for the financial report, payments of bills, the collection side. Can we get an update that Jim or Josh during it's the administrator's item? Administrator update item number the what number?
The committee or the, yeah, had anticipated providing that update as next item.
Whatever number that is. Thanks,
Yeah.
Josh.
Okay, then we will move to that, which is number 7, the administrative committee report, and that's the staff report by our administrator.
Yeah. Do you want me to start, Vice Chair McLaren, and then Josh will be covering the bulk of this?
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, thanks. As the board's aware, we did have the administrative committee last week, had quite a lengthy discussion on a number of items that'll be before you today, and got some clarification and some suggestions and recommendations on how to present this for the board's consideration. We'll be going through those items and pointing out where we've accommodated and taken the recommendations of the administrative committee. They weren't providing policy direction, but more thoughts and opportunities for us to clarify some points that they thought would be helpful, and we agreed with that. So we've made those modifications. A lot of items on the discussion that we covered, and we'll go through in more detail during the remainder of the agenda. And then, Josh, if you have anything to add, you can do that now.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. To Russ's, Director Bryden's comment. So one of the asks was an update on the accounts receivable, specifically to the supplemental assessment, which, as a reminder to everyone on the board, the reason for the supplemental assessment was to get enough funding to get through the rest of the year to pay the consultants and Q1, as we'll definitely identify later on in the presentation with the 5-year projected cash flow. To date, as of September 23rd, 2023, we have received $131,543.27. And we anticipate receiving still in total $332,468.27. And if you do that in a percentage, we've received approximately 40% of the entire supplemental. And we do already have commitments to receive a few more checks this week, some of the larger checks. Running that math based on the projected cash uses for the rest of the year, we do project that we'll still have about $15,958.92 for the remaining year. So we are financially healthy enough to get through the rest of the year, assuming that there are no unforeseen costs that increase the average invoices for the remainder of the year, which in September we anticipate it being approximately 86,000, October 103, and November, December being 85,000.
Josh, to clarify, you're talking cash, right?
Correct. Yes.
As opposed to accrued revenue.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Then we will move on to...
Kathy?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I was late on the mute button there. I just addressed Jim and Joshua. I know there were some questions I had on the financials about fees and interest that were to you, as well as, to legal on collection of Rancho Sierra properties. Are they going to be addressed during admin and legal updates, or should we address them now?
Thank you, Dr. Yosek. To answer the question, there was a question by the admin committee as to whether the interest, which is charged on all late invoices, which is a 10% one-time late fee, if that was accounted for in the accounts receivables, and the answer to that is yes. That is already shown in the numbers that are in the financials. Whenever we do receive it, it is accounted for. As for the second question that the admin committee had was in relation to, does the account receivables take into account the recoverable costs from the legal fees but the answer to that was no. And the reason for that is basically the principle states that anything on the accounts receivables is something that we have a high probability of receiving, and it shouldn't be accounted for unless we're more than likely certain that we will receive it. And so that's why it's not shown there.
Great.
And as to Rancho Sierra Properties, we have a placeholder in the closed session to discuss that.
Great.
You should.
Thank you both. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay. Now we will move to our public hearing to consider the amendment to the rules and regulation for the unanimous voting requirements. Item up A is opening up the public hearing.
Can I, before we do so, give a little background of what's happened in the last 48 hours on this topic that leads me to think we probably should continue it a month to October. I was informed Monday and handed some amendments to the language that we were going to add to the rules and regulations concerning unanimous vote. And it was new information, new language that I think the board should look at, should consider. I mean, we've seen the language for 2 months. Everyone was, I think, completely as one mind to go forward with it. But I haven't had a chance to give you an analysis from legal about the proposed changes. I think there's credible reasons for these changes. And I think they need to be heard. But the board is welcome to get comments from the public now or any advisory committee members who would like to comment on the proposed couple of changes. But I'm not comfortable moving forward without those changes being brought to your attention and considered. They may be rejected, they may not, but it'll give everyone a chance to, when we do public comment, the public knows what the document is that they're commenting on.
Chairman Claren, I would like to open up a public hearing and hear the comments that need to be said and people prepared to say today,
Okay.
if any.
I'm good with that.
So
It's
It's
fine to
only-
open it up for public comment. I just wanted to give you a heads up that this issue is there, and likely after public comment might be appropriate to continue this for a month. But
Okay.
leave it at that.
Can you share who submitted?
So,
it?
Derek, did you want to say something?
yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, Matt. Sorry there. But I guess my point would be is that I think it's important what you're saying, Craig, is that there are new information that you've received that public hasn't had a chance to look at that may change or add to their comments. Is that your concern about pushing it a month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't like I'm fine listening. I just don't, I would, encourage the board to listen to counsel's advice of not making a decision moving forward and knowing that public may come back and provide more feedback based upon what Craig reviews and presents to the board.
Okay, we don't need a motion, just the consensus to open the public hearing.
And that's fine. You
Okay.
can go forward with the public hearing and just be aware
Right.
that at the end of it, I likely will be suggesting we continue it for a month.
Right. Okay, which would be right after this. Okay, so right now we're opening the public hearing, which I kind of feel is a good thing because especially if somebody came here or is on this meeting, just speak on this item, that we give them this opportunity, and it sounds like there will be possibly other opportunities. So please come to your name come up and speak, and then we'll see if there's any people online on this.
Good morning, folks. This is Keith Lemieux. I think I spoke with about this last time it came up, and I'm not completely sure what the new proposal is, so forgive me. So I don't know exactly what I'm speaking on, but I'm speaking on what I understand to be the proposal prior, and I'm speaking on behalf of my public water suppliers. In short, it seems like this proposal is sort of a solution in search of a problem. We don't identify the need to abstain from things as something that should come up very often. And so, the principle of unanimous vote was really important to putting this entity together. It affected decisions about how many seats to have and who should be on the seats and how the seats would be appointed. So it's sort of bedrock to the construction of this entity. I know a lot of people from the outside look at it and go, unanimous voting, that's crazy. But I have to tell you that was a bedrock principle that allowed us to reach an agreement to form the Watermaster the way we have it. And so as a result, we're very reluctant to consider anything that would take that away, particularly for non-trivial voting matters. And for that reason, the public water supplier group was against this change. And I guess that's the long and short of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please come up.
Hi, I'm John Clandry, and for one of the few times I agree with Keith. We fought for so many years. This board, I was on the board for 6 years. This board has got a great deal of credibility. To not keep this vote unanimous like we have currently done it since the inception, I think would be a huge mistake. I think we would start to look like the federal government and be fighting amongst each other. This has been a beautiful system. It's worked wonderful, and this board has the ultimate in credibility. Keep it the same. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this?
Welcome back to this.
All on my own. How about that? The memo does say that the committee recommends no action on this, but not knowing what the comments were, I don't know if that would change anything. So,
Dennis, what was the vote on this item?
6-2,
Thank you.
and the two were concerned, about how to address times when there's not 5. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone online?
Not seeing anybody raise hand or put anything in the comment.
Okay. Well, if there's no other public comments, then we can close the public comment hearing, and that would be closing of the public hearing. Okay, then we will go to number 9, which is consideration and possible action to amendment to rules and regulation for unanimous voting requirements.
Sounds like we have recommendations from Craig to table this item.
You do. I think that the fact is this has been a very important discussion that's gone on for 3 months, essentially. And I think continuing the discussion for 1 month to have me be able to present to you directly and to have the advisory committee see the language that's being proposed and comment on it is important. This entire discussion arose from one matter where we did not have a unanimous vote. And so it's not likely, as was said from the pulpit here, that this is going to be repeated anytime soon. We hope not, at least. So I say that, and I don't think there's critical that it be voted on at this board meeting. And suggest, recommend to the board we continue it a month.
Discussion.
I don't know that there's anything that would change my mind, but I think I'm okay to move forward as long as it concludes at the next meeting. We've got quite a bit in fees. We're really concerned with our administrative costs. I think maybe this is one area we could save some money. But given the amount of work we put in, I'm okay continuing it one additional time.
So was yours a motion?
I didn't make the motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You had a question. Okay.
So we need a motion on the table this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion to table this until next month.
Do I hear a second? Well, I could make a second, but do
I'll
we need
second
to
it.
have, okay, because I was gonna say, I'm looking at Brandon, because I just want to say, I mean, if we need to have more discussion about it, we can do that. And if you felt like there was enough to put on an additional motion, that would be open. Okay, so we now have a motion
In a second.
and a second. Sounds reluctantly, but, okay, we have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
and Director Nelson.
yes.
And that does pass.
Okay. So we'll be seeing that item next month. Okay, number 10 is consideration and possible action on formation of ad hoc board committee of Calandri, Lamoureux, and Knudsen to negotiate the 2024 Watermaster Administrator contract with Hallmark Group. That would be a staff report from our general counsel.
Yes, Chair Paris asked about his ability to be able to establish an ad hoc committee to negotiate potential contract terms with Hallmark. We believe that authority exists under the judgment and under the government code. It's an ad hoc committee. It's less than a quorum. It has, I don't mean to say it has no power, but it has no ability to bind this board in any way, shape, or form. It's just to negotiate. And it's a diverse group from someone from the advisory committee and 2 members of the board. My suggestion and recommendation is that it be subject to a motion, just so that we're clear on the record that we're forming that ad hoc committee.
Discussion. Mr. Lamoureux, would you mind coming back up here, sir?
You should have never told them what they're gonna call.
Yeah, I'll learn.
Dennis, would you mind going through this one with us, just for everybody listening, as well as far as where the advisory committee was on this?
Sure. Have the notes in front of me just in case I forget something.
I appreciate that.
In the discussion with the advisory committee, there's still a lot of frustration, I'll just say, that we haven't dealt with this earlier in the year, and hopefully done even an RFP for the process. And because of that, the recommendation on this item failed as a motion to recommend this to the board failed. The vote was 2, 5, and 1. I was the 1 because I serve at the pleasure of the committee. The 2 that voted for this had the caveat that just because we negotiate doesn't mean there will be a successful negotiation. So that's the gist of the discussion with the committee.
Appreciate that. I want to make sure that it's clear. The ad hoc committee that's being proposed has 0 power to go into an agreement with Hallmark. It is purely to negotiate with them, find out where they're at on their contract, and present it to the board. So the question that was arised on that was, then what's the point? How come the Hallmark's just not proposing their contract to us through the normal channels and going about it in that manner? Which I can understand that argument. I mean, we have an advisory committee, we have a process in place to handle some of these issues with the ad hoc committee. Quite honestly, if there's going to be an ad hoc committee, happy to be on it, happy to serve on it. But I would like to get your assessment, Mr. Lamoureux, based off your conversations with the advisory committee, with those understandings in place, what you feel your recommendation would be on the ad hoc committee or the formation of the ad hoc committee.
Well, I can only speak the way the committee voted, and they didn't vote to recommend this. You know, purely for the reasons that I've already stated and are already in the memo. I will say, when I was called to and asked to be part of this, I did clarify that he was calling for the chair of the committee to be part of this ad hoc committee, not individual person. So, we'll see where the board goes with this. If the board were to approve this, I would certainly get my marching orders from the committee as to how we go forward.
And I would too, from the people I represent. Okay, thank you for your time. And Chairman McLaren, are we going to have time for any other public comment on this?
Okay, are we having board feedback first or public comment?
Yeah, any more questions from the board for the advisory committee? All right, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, just to clarify, this ad hoc is being asked to be created by the chair, Rob, right? Not by Hallmark. This whole purpose was coming out of Rob's request. Is that right, Craig?
That's right. That's my understanding.
Okay. I may have misinterpreted the comment made, so I wanted to make sure clarified.
Yeah, and Chair or Director Urosic, I can also agree with Craig. We did not request this.
Okay.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
For board comments, I do. Yeah.
Yes.
As part of the creation of this subcommittee,
Ad hoc?
ad hoc committee. Thank you, Director Knudsen. Is there a timeline? When can we expect to see comments back? Was any of that contemplated when we put this together? I want to make sure that we get information back in time to be able to evaluate it and take action one way or another. And if we don't, and it just asks that the committee put that together, we can talk about it offline. Sounds like
That was not discussed.
That was not discussed, and it's a great point.
And just to in full transparency, Hallmark has had no conversation with any board members about what this committee's charge is and doing. We are awaiting direction from the entire board.
Jim, and you may be able to answer this right now or not, but what would you anticipate Hallmark's ability to have some type of proposal put together for the committee?
Yeah, Director Calandri, we can do a very quick turnaround. It depends on the ability to reach closure on the budget components that we'll be discussing later in the agenda. Those really will provide the framework for developing a budget, which is not only includes the Hallmark contract, but the anticipated expenditures for the entire Watermaster group, including your other two consultants. So if we can close on that today, we're looking at a very quick turnaround to get information back to whatever body is going to review this.
When you say quick turnaround, is that days, weeks, months?
It depends on what process this group. If we have to work through an ad hoc prior to the advisory committee, we may not. We're looking at a couple weeks to prepare our draft working material. If it's next week, that will be a push. As you guys are aware, I'm on vacation, so we have a little bit of time. I don't plan on dropping my vacation to work on a budget. Sorry, guys. So we're looking at probably 2 weeks out before we could do our first review with whomever the next step of review is, whether it's with an ad hoc or going directly to the administrative committee and advisory committees prior to the next board meeting.
So the chances of us, Director Bryden, it sounds like the way I'm interpreting it, the chances of us having this squared away by the October meeting is remote. We're dark in November, so now we're looking December.
And not just that, but it's squared away for this meeting. I want to make sure that the advisory committee has time to take a good hard look at this too.
So I think regardless of what we're looking at, we're already in our December meeting.
Any other discussion?
I do, although my mind might be pie in the sky. Regarding formation of this committee, I'd want the ability, I wish we had time for this, but I don't think we do. I'd want the ability for the directors to reflect on stuff we felt went well with the current contract, things we felt didn't go well. Kind of an assessment after action. And then to give those as negotiating, I don't know, boxes to check, things to make sure they're included in the next contract. Again, I don't know that we have time, but I intend to spend a couple of minutes and shoot that over. So I ask that you at least consider this if the committee is formed.
So, I don't know if you guys use them much, but we have a wonderful guy at Palmdale Water District, Dr. Mathis, and when there were different things like that, he always suggested that we had a workshop in the sense that it gave the public, gave everyone a chance to talk in a more informal way, but to really delve into some of the questions and everything. So I'm just putting that out there because I don't know, like you say, that it's so close on time and everything, and that if you did do a workshop where you could have the different committees and all those committee members there, where they really felt like they could have an interactive, with that, as well as us discussing it. It's just something I'd like to put out there since we are close on time, and that would be like a way to give more opportunity, more transparency, I think. So,
Can I make a suggestion?
sure.
So, assuming the ad hoc committee is formed, I imagine the committee members would have an initial meeting to discuss the process and the goals. And we would communicate with Hallmark on that. What if we had, before the next board meeting, just the board could have a special meeting to go over the progress being made with Hallmark, and then that would allow time to get feedback from the board before it goes to the advisory committee prior to the November or the October.
I like that.
Walk me through that one more time, Matt. I'm sorry. I need to
So if the ad hoc committee is formed today,
okay.
I think the committee could meet immediately within days, right?
Yes.
And talk about what goals each party, the collective group wants to achieve. And then we could communicate some of that with Hallmark Group and get at least an initial proposal from them.
Okay.
And then maybe the committee can meet again prior to having a special meeting with just the board. So the cost wouldn't be significant for a special meeting because we wouldn't need any support staff, probably legal. And then we could get feedback from the full board before it goes to the advisory committee for input, prior to October. I mean, maybe that's too aggressive, but that's my thought. Just, I mean, because the likelihood of something getting approved in October is pretty slim, right? It's probably going to be pushed, if anything, to the meeting in early December. So.
Any thoughts on that, Derek? Since I'm kind of looking from side to side, I feel like I can look at you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I do agree. I like Matt's thoughts behind that. I think if what I'm hearing from everyone is there wants to be a detailed process, but needs to be expedited, and that's going to take potentially some additional meetings in some sort, whether board meetings or public meetings of some sort to I think appease everyone that's wanting input and interaction on that. I would say that to me, this contract negotiated and approving it, whether we do or not, or approve anything, has to be post-budget approval because it's going to be part of the budget as well. So, just be aware that, nothing gets approved or, of any contracts until we approve that budget, spend that money going forward into 2024.
And Chair McLaren, if I may, I think it would be helpful. It sounds like a couple ideas are on the table. One is the ad hoc, the second being the public workshop, and now I've heard a third option of a special meeting without staff or legal to save on the cost, because as we're all aware, the budget's a little tight for the rest of this year. I think I would just look to legal counsel to provide thoughts on the third option of having that special meeting without legal or staff, just making sure that.
And just to clarify, my proposal was without staff, but with legal.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
What do you think about that? So kind of right now, it's everyone from like what I said. I really liked what Matt said. That and Derek sounds like he would be okay with that, and Russ. Okay, so Craig,
Yeah,
what do you feel about that?
I think first things first, we form the ad hoc committee and make sure that's passed by vote.
But I think we can do that, but I think some of us were looking at before we chose to do the ad hoc, that we weren't just simply going to do the ad hoc without knowing where we were going to go after that, and that others that felt like the ad hoc is just a smaller group and wasn't necessarily giving us the thing, unless however you guys want to do it, and we can just do that and then ask Craig on the next step. I kind of looked at them as kind of like an amendment to, or an add-on to the ad hoc question, that we're going to afford an ad hoc with a special meeting.
Yeah, my sense is that the ad hoc is going to move quickly. They're going to meet with Hallmark. There is the very strong possibility, regardless of whether Jim works while he's in Pittsburgh on vacation. This is a hint, Jim, that in a couple of weeks there'll be a document for this board to review and for public comment on. And I think that can be done before a month before the October meeting and have significant input on it at that point.
Yeah.
So could we have a special meeting, though?
Well, whether we need a special meeting or do it in open session, it's got to be public. I mean, this is a public presentation and discussion by the time they come back with the proposal. I just think the comments can be expedited and the October board meeting used substantially to accomplish the input functions you're looking for.
Yeah, if Vice Chair McLaren, if I could add a couple of comments, it might be helpful as you continue your discussion.
Go ahead.
First off, I'm on vacation. I still read my email. Josh and Jacqueline can do the heavy lifting and get the budget done, whatever time frame you guys put together. So as long as Josh doesn't go on vacation and my email works, we'll get done whatever we need to do to get back to you guys. The second thing is if you are considering having a special meeting or board meeting, I'm assuming you are not requiring any, and that means zero support from Hallmark. If you do need support from Hallmark, and not me, not attendance, but scheduling meetings, coordinating agendas, reviewing that, that's Josh's time. We don't have authorization or approval to do that. So you have to consider how you, if Hallmark's not going to do that, you'll have to figure out how to accommodate that. We just don't have the authorization, as we will describe as we go through a couple of the agenda items.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Can
I think
we ask the public what they think?
absolutely. That's my concern about a special meeting.
Okay.
Is that
She's
we
referring
have
to public comment on this.
Okay,
Can we have a public?
absolutely.
Please come up and.
This was the very situation that the advisory committee
Sorry,
was
can you
concerned
state your
about.
name for the record?
Julie Kyle. This was the very situation that the advisory committee has been concerned about since January, that if we only had a 1-year contract, it appeared to us that early on we should be looking at an RFP no matter who submitted that, Hallmark, whoever else. Now we're in a situation where we're right at the very last minute and there's a push. This was the main reason that the advisory committee, and Dennis, I'm sure would agree with this. This was the main reason that the advisory committee was against the ad hoc. We were shocked when you guys came back out of closed session to talk about negotiating a contract with Hallmark, and it was not anything that had ever gone before the advisory. That's where the vote came in. We got a very small amount of time and a big job. Thank you.
Do you have any suggestions of like what we were talking about?
On the ad hoc.
Whether special meeting or any other ideas?
I think the special meeting would be fantastic, and I don't think you need any support. I mean, you've got Brandon, Matt, and Dennis. You guys are ready to go. I'm sure you are. Yeah. And I don't think you need, we don't need to worry about funding or in scope and out of scope and all of that, because you guys are doing it for free.
I know.
Any other public comment on that? Do we have anyone online?
Not seeing any hands raised online.
Okay. Well, my fellow board members and one in computer land.
Matt, you want to try and formulate a motion off of all that?
Well, I think all we need to do right now is a motion to form the ad hoc committee as proposed.
I agree.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Do I hear any public comments? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Chair McLaren,
Yes.
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandry,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
Director Knudsen,
Yes.
and that passes.
Okay.
So I think maybe just to close the loop on this, I
Yes.
think the ad hoc committee will get together in the next couple days and formulate a plan
I'm ready.
and communicate that to all the parties.
I'll make myself available.
All right.
Okay. Okay. So with that, we will go to number 11, which is consideration and possible action on Hallmark Group Amendment number 5. This will be our administrator will give us our staff report.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair McLaren. I'll be starting this, and Josh and I will be tag teaming like we always do. So just want to remind the the board members and the stakeholders that are participating today of a little bit of the background on this. We did present a proposed amendment at our August 23 board meeting, so that's a month ago. We'll go to the next slide, and again, want to remind folks of what you saw and what the board reviewed. So what we did was we presented an initial estimate from the Hallmark team on what it would cost to implement administration through the end of the year. And again, we provided several options on potential cost savings items. And we had year-to-date costs were through the end of July, and then through August through December were estimates based on our best available information. And at that point, we presented this spreadsheet and said we looked like our anticipated task order, the cost to provide services, implementing some of the cost-saving items that Hallmark had proposed. This was prior to board discussion, so this was implementing the whole portfolio of cost-saving items that we could think of, and we narrowed those costs down to $20,393 estimate through the end of the year. The next slide we can go to, we did identify that there was additional funding that had not been utilized in the application administration activity that could be utilized, or we proposed to be utilized to offset a portion of that effort. And we'll get to follow-up that we had on that. But our suggestion was that the board consider applying that the use of those funds towards the overall Watermaster duties. So those funds at the time were estimated to be about $2,688. So the next slide showed what the net impact of taking those steps would be. If you had implemented all of the portfolio of potential cost-saving measures identified and utilized the administration funds that were available, we were recommending a task order of $17,706. That was staff's initial presentation. Then what followed was extensive board stakeholder review. Again, Hallmark was tasked with coming up with ideas at the direction of the board and concluding skipping this September meeting, going dark. The board had extensive direction and came up with specific directions for Hallmark to follow in going forward. So what we did was we did take the action that the board directed us to do. We canceled in-person office in Palmdale for the remainder of the year, but remember, Josh is always available, and we're continuing to have office hours when he's here on board meeting, and then be available remotely. I will not be.
Just to clarify, we also elected to cancel the office hours after board meeting, but I would be available via phone calls, emails, and if someone needed to schedule a Zoom meeting.
Thanks for that clarification, Josh. And I would be attending meetings remotely through the remainder of the year. The board, as I said, did not cancel this meeting, and then directed staff to make those changes and to reconsider the amendment at the September board meeting. Also, it allowed the advisory committee to have an opportunity to review in greater detail, more time than had previously occurred for them to consider their perspective on this proposed amendment. So since that time, we've been working on implementing those measures, and we also have new year-to-date numbers that take us through August. So now you can look at these are new slides that you have not seen before. It's everything prior to July is from the previous month, but our year-to-date numbers are complete through the end of August. They did not change significantly. The August numbers, actuals were up because of an unbudgeted item came up, and we'll be discussing that later, related to work required by Josh and Jacqueline Harris, our financial officer, and a public Records Act request that required Hallmark to spend time on that. We'll be discussing that in another item, but a portion of that work was initiated and done in August, and there's a little bit remaining in September that we're projecting. So we'll get to that later in the agenda, but we did need to include that projection in the end of August and then through our projection. So let's go to the next slide. That's again just shows the general trends that we are showing that we will exceed our initial budget authorization through the end of the year. So we don't need to spend times on these. We had been asked numerous times, what's the require? Why are we in this position? Again, we had some estimated times to complete assigned tasks that were in our original contract, took more time. And we had some other items that were not included in that we did take on as responsibilities. Let's go to the next slide, Josh. Again, you've seen this. So we projected our costs now with the updated numbers through the end of the year. You can see that September, October, and November are essentially the same number based on our best estimate on typical months and projected duties during those months, with November being lower because of there being no meeting that month. So it's the non-meeting months cost. If you look at September, you'll see it's slightly higher than October and November because it does reflect some additional trailing costs related to compliance with the Public Record Act request that we received in August and carry over into September. So now our total projected cost for the rest of the year is now $26,451. So it has increased because there's been increased activity and a decision not to implement all of our cost-saving measures. So total projected costs for a task order to complete for the end of the year is $26,451. And if we go to the next slide, Josh. So with the next slide, we again recalculated where we stand on the application administration funds, and you can see that we still have about $26.44 left to apply, as we recommended last month. And in last month's board meeting, there was a request that we review with legal does the board have the discretion to utilize the funds derived from these application fees in completing general administration related to application that isn't directly funded. And so I know Josh and Craig have spoken about this, and it is within the board's discretion to utilize funds this way, but it does require your board action. I know if you have follow-up, Craig is there to answer any questions you have about the ability of the board to use the funds as we've identified here. I'll keep going and we can come back to that on the board question. So again, following our recommendation, a summary from last month, we did have projected administrative tasks for homework of $26,451. Utilizing the additional funds from the overage, it would mean our recommended task order is now $23,807 for the remainder of the year. And let's go to one of the questions that the administration committee was asking was, what was the origin of our tasks, and how much of our increase over our original authorization was related to low estimates of what it took to complete the baseline administration work, and how much of it was additional out of scope work. So I mentioned that I'd take a stab at that to the administration committee. So here for Derek and our directors, Jurasik and Bryden, this reflects some thoughts that Josh and I have put in to kind of get a back of the envelope look at what's the nature of those costs. So you can see our initial, if you look at this spreadsheet, the dark blue items are authorized task orders that this board have already completed. And then we've got in light blue 2 pending and proposed task orders listed below. So you can see the initial contract task order was identified. We then were asked to develop a cash flow and information related to the supplemental fee. We spent times that was reimbursed or that was authorized, not reimbursed by our CPA. But the financial statement discrepancy resolution that was identified, Jacqueline Harris was reviewing the annual audit, and you can see that totaled $8,150. And then there was the administration related to the supplemental assessment. So those 4 items reflect actions and task orders that have been approved by this board. As I mentioned, we've got about $1,444 worth of work related to Tucker response to the Public Records Act request that the Watermaster received. And we've got the last task order that I mentioned that completes the work for the remainder of the year. And that's the 2641. So if you look at the total task order, it's $218,000. I did add in the 2644. It's a transfer from the administration budget that we're proposing because I wanted to present a total summary of what the authorized use of funds by Hallmark has been related to administration of the Watermaster activity, try and get an apples comparison. So total Hallmark administration budget would be $221,377 if the board were to approve the Public Records Act request task order and the task order 5, the task order required to complete the services for the remainder of the year. So I use those numbers in the next slide to give a feel to the board on what percentage of our contract was related to additional tasks and what percentage of our contract was related to low estimates or the increased time it took to complete tasks. So our initial contract amount was $164,188. The additional tasks that were identified, specific tasks that were within that completed, and that again, those included the 3 authorized tasks, as well as the proposed Public Records Act request. That totals $30,738, and then the additional time required to complete authorized task really is the summation of the remaining work, which, from my opinion, stems from the additional time it required to complete the task. And in layman's term, the estimates of time required to complete tasks were low. For example, our board meetings went longer than we were estimated, but that's just one of many examples. So you can see how that $221,377 total authorization totals up. Then I applied the percentage. What percent of that expenditure was related to the initial contract? 74%. Then the board added 14% of additional tasks that were outside the scope. And then I would say my best back of the envelope, about 12% of that overage were a result of lower estimates for completion of tasks. And I want to remind the group, our initial contract was based on the best estimates from Antelope Valley, East Kern, and Palmdale, and folks that had performed that. And it was based on their recall, their record keeping, so when I look at that and say that we had a 12% miss on the estimated time, I think that's within a reasonable amount. One question I thought would get asked is what percent of our initial contract related to the administration was all that overages? How did that up? And it's about a 16%. So that's the 26,451 divided by the 164. So you can see about a 16% if you just look at that. I think, my assessment, I wouldn't be presenting these to you if I didn't think they were reasonable. I think, given the history of this organization and the use of the best estimates, that we came within a reasonable approach of what the budget and the tasks were for this group. And I think, Josh, that's the last slide, or is there another one? Oh, sorry. I don't need to belabor these last two slides. We updated the cash flow projections because the question we've been asked and was whether or not with these increases would we survive a cash flow. And the key number to look at is cash on hand at the end of the year. And the adjusted cash end of the year is the last dark blue column. So you can see with those changes, it means that our estimate would be short about $2,163 at the projection. But again, that includes our utilization of $180,000 for the first 3 months. That this model just is not robust enough that I did a 2 monthly time step. So given the translation of this to monthly time step, we would not impact our ability to maintain a positive cash flow. In other words, our checking accounts wouldn't go zero because that 180 doesn't get expended at one time. It would get expended over the first 3 quarters of the following year. And we would expect that we'd get cash in by then. The other thing is the estimates for some of the activities, for example, the administrative component related to Antelope Valley, East Kern, and Palmdale's support of continued support of the Watermaster duties were pretty high, but not high. They were conservative in that they haven't been billing much against that budget item, and we expect that will come under the anticipated expenditures, but to be conservative, we assume that would be all utilized. So given this analysis, I feel confident that we'll end the year with the ability to maintain a positive cash flow. And so our recommendation is to authorize a task order for $23,807. And as all our task orders and all the authorization, that assumes that no additional tasks are given to homework. So if we get another Public Records Act request, for example, between now and the end of the year, we'll have to consider what this board would like to do to cover the expenditures and costs associated with responding to that, because we have not included any additional buffer or authorizations beyond specifically what we've identified. And at that, I know I went through a lot, but I felt like it would be helpful to get the big picture. And then, of course, we can always go back to any specific item you'd like to discuss in more detail. And I know Craig is prepared to address any of the legal issues that have come up during this discussion.
I have an initial question. Jim, could you go back one slide?
Sure.
So this is kind of similar table that you all presented during the discussion of determining the supplemental assessment of $4.50. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if you look at the contracted administrator, was that the same number that was presented a couple months ago?
No.
230?
No. What we've done is we've updated to reflect the proposed changes that we've just identified, Director Knudsen. So that would include the assumption that this board would authorize $23,807. And Josh, you can weigh into that's the only modification that's occurred.
Okay, yeah, that was my question. If that's the only number that's changed in the cash flow model?
That's correct.
That's right. Because it would have been about 23,000 less than that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is what it was before all the changes.
Okay. So that additional 23,000 just comes out of the contingency or the remaining cash?
My understanding, Jim, is that it would come out of the contingency fund.
Okay.
Yeah, well, remember this model again assumes expenditure of the contingency.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I had one more question too.
Go ahead.
So if we go back to, it might have been a couple slides before where you put in the projected expenses for the remaining month. That one right there. So you said the reason the November was a little bit less than the remaining months is because of one combined meeting.
There is no
There
board
is no
meeting
November
in November.
meeting. So seems like December with only one meeting and holidays and the November December meeting being combined in early December doesn't seem like there's a much of a reduction just from reducing the meeting. So what?
Yeah,
what
Director Nateson, we elected to treat September, October, and December base expenses on the same basis, so that, like, give or take, you are close. We elected not to think that we can't manage to that level of detail unless you guys want to spend more time developing this worksheet.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Let's have some definitely discussion. I feel there's going to be some discussion on this item because I can personally say that I have a lot of questions. Looking at amendments and everything about our contract and possible ramifications of a decision being made. And we really haven't had a chance to discuss all that with Craig Parton. So I'll start off with that and I'll let the rest of you.
Chairman Claren, I'd like to see if there's I'd like to be able to hear public comment, because that could influence some of my comments as well. There might be something that hasn't been thought of, or
Yes.
some issue out there that hasn't been addressed. So it would be possible, it'd be nice to hear public comment.
Yes, we always would love to hear our public comments.
First of all, I apologize for some of my jokes, but I see these stern looks on these faces when I sit up there. I know how tough it is. I want to say a couple things. I'm going to give an illustration of a year that I'm sorry, I'm John Calandry.
Thank you.
An ex-onion grower and
Recovered.
devout citizen to Antelope Valley. There was a year that I had an onion contract. I'd promised the company I'd supply them onions for a certain price. Well, I didn't have a good crop that year. So I had to go out and buy onions at $2, $3, $4 a loss per bag. My customer never heard a thing about it. I kept that customer for 30 years. Made it up to me in the long run. But I had my reputation on the line. That was the deal. That was the agreement. I'm going to make reference to consulting service agreement here. Exhibit B, and I'm going to read it. I'm sure you guys know it. But in no event shall the total amount of fees and reimbursable costs and expenses paid to the consultant during the term of this agreement exceed $165. All consultant time, costs, and expenses incurred in excess of such amount during the term of this agreement shall be borne solely by the consultant. I believe this phrase alone allows the board to say no. I also believe that there's some votes on the board that there's probably a hard yes to give Hallmark this additional money. I think there's a few hard no's. I think that puts Hallmark in a tough position. I personally don't think they should get a penny. However, the way they got this job was by a compromise between me Derek Urasic, some other members on the board. Some were on my side, some were not on my side. But I compromised to get a job done. So I am going to suggest that Hallmark remember that they were hired by a compromise. So my suggestion is to Hallmark and the board that you take this number, as much as I disagree with their request, and you split it in half and call it a day. For the sake of the community, to show the board is being as understanding as they can be in bargaining in good faith. But I think Hallmark has to do the same thing at their end. So my suggest, and this is not, I do not have the support of all the other landowners on my comment. This is my comment because I've been on both sides of the table. I'm more nervous on this side of the podium than I was on that side, but I understand what you guys are going through. So my suggestion would be a compromise right down the middle. And I do thank you for your time.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Julie Kyle, and one comment that I had just on the agenda, why is that considered out of scope? Why is Amendment 5 considered out of scope work? This is work to complete the end of the year, correct? That's not out of scope. Secondly, great respect for John. I wouldn't go a penny. That is in scope work. That contract should be honored. I wouldn't go a dime. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public that would like to speak? Do we have anyone online?
Not seeing anyone online.
Okay. Directors, please weigh in your comments. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just say before you ask them, I don't want to seem evasive, but there may be questions about our legal position on the contract that is appropriate for closed session. We don't have one scheduled. You're welcome to fire away, but if we wander into that area, I'm going to recommend that we do a closed session next month.
Correct. Would it fall under item F of closed session?
Yeah.
Craig,
What's that?
could it fall under item F of today's closed session item? Because we do have public employee performance evaluation.
Okay. Thanks for the reminder. I know we had that review session last month. If we've got it continued,
Yeah.
I changed my view.
I'm one step ahead of you, Craig.
Good. Then we can do it in closed session if it's a legal opinion that we're wanting with respect to the contract.
It is. So my questions have to do with the interpretation of the contract, application of contract law to the contract we negotiated.
So
Yeah.
if we wanted to go into closed session, how would we do that since that is
We're
there?
scheduled for it after this in the course, item number, whatever it is. 21.
So can we vote to continue this item until after closed session?
You can. We should have indicated that when we started, that
Right,
we had
but-
a change in the agenda
Yeah,
schedule.
but I had asked you, for that, and we didn't think that we were able to do that, not realizing that, so that was how that came about. It wasn't purposely that we did it this way.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, we need to have a closed session to discuss those issues. And if we can come back and bring this up for resolution one way or the other on Amendment 5 today, it'd be to the board's benefit.
And as we're discussing, or we could do it for next week, but that's why we will discuss. And, the public also, if they have any concerns on whether we do it today but now's our time to discuss it.
we need to get this thing addressed today.
Yeah.
I mean, just have to.
Yeah, I just add for the board and the stakeholders present, we presented an estimated projected cash flow and authorization flow as well, and Josh and I were just checked, and it looks like we'll run out of authorization in early October. So
Before the board meeting.
Yes,
before the next board meeting, and I pointed that out last month, and we pointed that out.
So, Jim, I'm sorry, I'm just not feeling 1,000% today, and I just need to ask a very direct question. Are you saying that basically we're out of money with you guys by next board meeting, and if we don't get it resolved today, you're not there?
If you do not get something resolved today, I will have to discuss how the CEO and the owner of this company wish to proceed with our contract.
Okay.
That's all I can.
I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks.
That's it.
We need to address it. We need to get this figured out today.
Yeah, I am not in a position to negotiate with you, nor am I willing to do that in this meeting. But I'm letting you know, like, if there is no resolution to this today, I'll have to ask Chuck Gardner, the owner of Homer, how he'd like to proceed and how he'd direct his staff to continue in this area.
And Jim, just for clarity, I wasn't looking for negotiation. I was just trying to find out where we're at.
Oh, yeah, I just thought that it would be helpful so that folks know that that's not something we're capable of doing today, nor willing to do.
Jim, it's Russ, or Director Bright. Appreciate you being direct on this.
Derek, since I haven't had a chance to, I'm looking at you up there. What are your comments on this, please?
Only comments is I think we need to, my questions are for closed session in regards to conferencing with legal. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my recommendation is we table this till after the closed session today, take it up immediately after the closed session, we come back.
Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any public comment on us tabling this until we are able to discuss in closed session? Do we have anyone online?
I'm not seeing anyone online.
Okay, so do I have a roll call vote on that?
Chair McLaren,
Yes.
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
and Director Knudsen.
Yes.
And that passes.
Okay, that motion is tabled until after we go to closed session.
Chairman Clarence, can I request a 2-minute break?
Yes, please. Yes. We will take a 2-minute break. Now we will go to item number 12, which is consideration and possible action on Hallmark Group Amendment number 6. And that's the staff report of the administrator.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair McLaren. As I mentioned earlier, we did receive a Public Record Act request to the Watermaster that required staff response, and the director is aware that we've had to work with you to provide information regarding that request. That included time that both Josh Montoya and Jacqueline Harris had to spend preparing and presenting documents, as well as Josh's time coordinating with legal. So that's the nature of this request. It's before you. Josh can go through the rest.
Yes. So that the proposal here is for $1,443.75, and to not to take Dennis's limelight here, but the advisory committee did vote and unanimously approve this order here, with the caveat that legal counsel will reach out and try to recoup some of the costs here. And happy to answer any questions from members of the board.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Just a quick legal question. Craig,
To number 13, the update on the 2024 budget.
I have a question on this. Josh, how do we do a budget review and components of it with our previous item getting moved to after the closed session? Are we okay to proceed with this?
Yeah, why don't we give a little background and you'll notice that this is just for budget components rather than amounts.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and let Jim provide some background on why we're handling this approach.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair McLaren and Director Calandri. Josh and Jacqueline and I have been working on the components of the budget and just wanted to give folks an overview of how we proceed and why we did it this way. So, in other public agencies that we administer, we start each year's budget creation process with a review of the components. And what that is just the menu of items that should be considered by staff in preparing the draft budget. So what we do is we put a list together of activities that may or may not be included in the draft budget. So rather than waste time on developing numbers and costs for items that the board or stakeholders with the board's approval don't want to see, we only focus on the items that really are of interest rather than wasting time developing potential pie in the sky or things that have little or no interest to the directors. So this is the initial review of the menu of budget items to be prepared by staff for the upcoming budget cycle. And it also includes some recommendations for not just the Hallmark portion of the budget, but the entire budget. And this is also helpful for us. It would be the structure that we'd use to draft the preliminary contract with Hallmark for the coming year. So as I mentioned earlier, our ability to develop a contract for next year would be predicated on getting sufficient resolution and direction under this item of what to include in that. And Josh will walk you through the specific areas and understand what's recommended and what we think would be appropriate. Those lists derive from our year's worth of effort, where during meetings, either a director or a stakeholder would request some activity and would indicate, hey, we don't have that in our current authorization. Would you like us to come back with a task order included a future budget item? And so each time the board directed us to include that in the future budget item, Josh kept a running tally of those types of requests. In other instances, we've just identified some things that we thought were worth the board considering on how to administer the Watermaster organization. Whether or not you do it, that's why we put it there. So we have no pride of authorship. It's our first shot to get feedback from stakeholders on board on what to include in the budget, the preliminary budget that we'd be creating for next board meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to Josh. He can walk you through the details and the spreadsheet that we've got in the packet to review.
Thank you, Jim. So we can either go line by item, or I can address the changes that were made, whatever the board's pleasure. For the sake of time, I do see that it is 11:30, so I'll just note that anything that's in black there are items that were already included in our contract or from already approved calendar year 2023 budget that was in the December 7th special meeting 2022. In the gold text are all of the new items that are being proposed, as Jim stated, either suggestions from the admin committee, the board, advisory members, or members of the public, or suggestions made by Hallmark, which I'll address those here shortly. And the items there on red are the ones that are deleted. So you'll notice that the first three items there, the hours were increased to actively reflect the potential average of all the board, admin, and advisory committee meetings, which led to the overage for 2022. And on line item 5, which relates to number 6, I deleted the minimal monthly meeting preparation for advisory committee. In that would, just a clarification, tying into number 5, which you can see there in bold, which is essentially full support, just more time to prepare for the advisory committee, since I, Josh Montoya, are the only one that attends those meetings. So that would include perhaps further assistance in preparing for those. And on line item number 7, we had already approved, the board had already approved removing the office hours, as I had indicated in the previous meeting, that there was very minimal participation by the public, and so it was not very cost effective for me to come down for 2 hours and the board to pay for the travel time and the time for me to be here. So I did remove that item as a suggestion. And again, as a reminder, still available to the public via phone call, emails, anytime. Moving down to number 10, assisting potential applicants electing not to submit an application. And that right there is really tying into, as you can see, really the availability to assist the public. When someone calls and is asking questions regarding specifics to an application, what's the process look like? Can you help me understand which one I need to apply for? I don't charge for that time because I only bill towards when an application is actually submitted, because then there's a fee to bill against. But there's a lot of instances in which landowners or potential applicants request information, and I spend quite a bit of time with them, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, and I never receive an application for them. So at that point, it goes to the general fund. So I suggested creating a little extra bucket to assist those specific instances. Moving down to item number 20, you'll see facilitate election. That item there wasn't contemplated in the original budget because there was no election for calendar year 2023. But as we all know, there will be an election for 2024, so we'll need to contemplate that in the budget. Number 21 is refined financial reporting. We've received on numerous occasions from the admin committee to have a more robust financial reporting to make it a little more easier to understand for themselves and for members of the public. And so that way the admin committee could feel a little more comfortable in reporting to the board that they agree with the financials and they fully understand it. So that's what that line item there in the sub 21A and 21B is really just tying into 21, which is, some examples of what we would do, which is report budget to actuals for all consultants. So we're easily able to identify the trend in which, the what billed from the consultant, and you can sort of see what would be projected to spend at the end of the year and anticipate that extra spending.
Hey, Josh, I don't know if the online is synced up, but we need to move to the next slide.
I apologize. Thank you, Jim. 21B, as requested by the admin committee, is really just taking some effort to separate the restricted and the non-restricted in the financials. It becomes a little convoluted and difficult to understand for people, what is what and what are those two line items mean. So that would be another effort in refining the financials. Moving on to number 22, that was definitely one we spent a little extra time on for the advisory committee. What exactly does that mean? And what that means is for a lot of our contracts for other agencies that we serve, that item is really for Hallmark to manage the others consultants. We pay a little more attention to what is it that they're billing. Does it seem reasonable? Where are these costs coming from? Trying to really manage not only Hallmark's budget as is our responsibility, but also the other consultant's budget, which isn't currently being done at the moment. It seems that every consultant is individually managing their own budget. So that's what number 22 is there. Number 23 is enforcement actions for non-reporting pumpers. A lot of discussion has been held just in this calendar year that Hallmark has been present, in which, in particular, new production applicants are not reporting, their water use for the previous calendar year. And that could be for many reasons, but that line item there is really to have budget dedicated towards trying to get those new productions to inform the Watermaster what their previous water use was, if they used any, what's the current status on their well. And so that's what line item number 23 is. Line item number 24 is develop administrative assessment for replacement water. We've been discussing that for the past couple of months. As we all are aware, there is no budget specific to replacement water and for Todd groundwater and for the administrator to administer the replacement water. That money is coming out of the general fund, meaning that all landowners are paying for the handful of people who are needing to pay replacement water. So that line item there is to account for the cost that it takes to develop that administrative assessment fee to take into account staff and the engineer's time. Moving on to the next one, which is line item number 25, which is assist general counsel in amendments to rules and regulations. To date, we've already had a handful of amendments to rules and regulations, and that requires a little bit of extra time working with legal to make sure that we comply with the Brown Act, which is posting, for the public to view, knowing that the public, that this hearing is coming up, and just discussions related to those specific instances. And I anticipate that in 2024, there will be more amendments to the rules and regulations as we realize and continue to facilitate this agency will realize that there needs to be a little bit of changes to keep up with the issues that we're identifying. Moving on to line item number 26, which is conduct an analysis for the application fees. As we presented here today, and as I've already stated, there's a lot more that goes into an application than just receiving it, reviewing it, and presenting it to you. There's follow-ups that need to be held. There's sometimes applicants spend a lot extra time for their specific application. And currently we're billing against one general bucket, which as we're seeing is already creating a lot of difficulties. And so that line item there should find perhaps a process in which we can easily identify as staff and for Todd groundwater to assure that an applicant is paying the correct fee for their application. So really that line item is to find a more robust process to develop that fee. The next line item there is item number 27, which is identify illegal pumping in the basin. In previous board meetings, we had identified that there was a serious issue with illegal pumping in the basin, and this board has already taken measures to work with other agencies and the sheriff's office, if my recollection is correct, to help identify those. But just a suggestion there to add a line item and a specific allocation towards helping to identify any illegal pumping that's occurring within the basin. Moving on to the next line item. So yes, we've identified illegal pumping in the basin. Then the next one is to really enforce actions to stop essentially the illegal pumping. So that's what that next item there is for. Line item number 29, which is create frequently asked questions section on the website. Many of my phone calls that I received from the landowners or potential landowners are very repetitive questions. And a lot of the times when they call me, they say, I went to your website and I couldn't find this answer. Can you tell me it? And if we had a section on the website to answer a lot of those questions that I see from landowners, that would be an effort to reduce the cost that it takes for me to, get those phone calls, which 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes here and there eventually add up at the end of the month, and then most certainly at the end of the year. And that line item there was added in response to the board and the advisory committees essentially cry for what can we do to reduce the cost to run the administrator. And I found that that would most certainly be one that I would advocate for in reducing the cost. The next one would be line item number 30, which is identify potential grants. That was something that we had proposed in our original scope, informing the board that perhaps we should allocate a budget for Hallmark to look for potential grants to offset the cost of the Watermaster, but ultimately it was decided that that didn't want to be incorporated in the final contract for 2023. So I have put it there in case that was wanting to be contemplated once more. The next one is number 31, which is PRA request. And as we already see, we did receive one this year that was not budgeted. And at the direction of the admin committee, I had added that as a line item there. So that way your staff doesn't have to come to the board to request additional funding to respond to any potential PRA request. And line item number 32 is contingency. And as we can see in the cash flow that we presented, there was a contingency for all consultants of $50,000 for 2023 when we had sent out the supplemental assessment. So that line item there is really something for the board to consider if they would like to continue having a general bucket of a contingency fund for unforeseen costs, or if they wanted to have, a contingency fund for each consultant. And you'll see under B for Todd Groundwater and C for legal, there is that line item for a contingency fund in case that was something that the board wanted to move forward with. And I had added an enforcement line item for Todd Groundwater, of course, to help with enforcing any assistance in enforcement of the illegal pumping or non-reporting pumpers, and so that's what that line item is there. And for legal, as I previously stated, the new line item there is the contingency fund in case the board moves forward with having separate buckets rather than one large bucket. With that, I'll go ahead and leave. Any questions from the board? I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, Josh, before we answer board questions, I would just like to wrap up with a couple of quick comments. First, the contingency philosophy is something we need to get board direction on. We're very familiar with agencies that manage their sub-funds with contingencies within those sub-funds, and then also have a fund at the corporate level. That's just a philosophy that we felt it would be appropriate for the board to consider how you want to manage that, or even if you want to add it. That's just something we felt was appropriate to discuss and for the board to provide initial philosophy on. The last thing I'd say is I want to remind the board that today you're not being asked to adopt anything, adopt the budget. It's really, this is you giving feedback to staff of, hey, these are the items we'd like to see developed costs for, and these are the items that we don't need to see costs for. And if there's additional items, the other significant benefit of this action and discussion item is it allows the board to say, hey, you missed this. We'd like to see you add this item and provide a cost associated with those services, as well as stakeholders to say why or why isn't that on there. Again, first step in budget preparation and adoption. Thanks.
And if I could continue on that, just so the board fully understands the process of approving the budget. What we have before you, as Jim stated, are all the budget components in which we'll receive direction to develop the budget based off the feedback presented, or excuse me, the direction provided by the board. We'll use that direction to develop the budget and present it at the October 25th, 2023 board meeting, where the board will see all the budget components with the associated costs and decide which items they would like to remove, and we'll take that direction and present the final draft budget at the special December board meeting and for final adoption for the calendar year 2024.
So Josh, it sounds like this is a lot of the work that's already gone into Hallmark making a proposal for a future contract is what I'm looking at.
The budget components, but not the cost associated with them.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Chairman Fine.
Okay, all right. We will go to number 14 now, consideration and thoughtful action.
Sorry, to clarify, the purpose of presenting this was for the board to provide feedback on, yes, we would accept these changes, and not making decisions, of course, providing feedback and direction on what it is you would like to see. And if you could say that.
If the board's comfortable with, seeing all this populated and that looks good enough for you guys to consider, that's fine with us. If there's items you'd like us to remove, that would be helpful. If there's items you'd like to add, that would also be helpful.
Yeah,
But if you're okay, that would be helpful to know too. Like, hey, I like the list. Move on.
Did I read that first page correctly that you guys are removing the advisory board packet preparation?
No.
Or is that not correct?
No, that is not correct. So line item number 6 is removal of the minimal monthly meeting preparation, and it's moved on to line item number 5, which is monthly meeting preparation for board of directors, administrative committee, and advisory committee.
Okay, I'm good.
This is Derek. And, thanks. Hallmark, I think you added a lot of what the admin had requested. The one point I think we need to talk about, or just be aware and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Todd Groundwater's contract is up or needs to be reviewed. So I think that's part of, what we need to take place in preparing the budget is deal with that as well. And if I'm wrong, please correct me.
I believe it's up in December 24.
That's correct. It goes
Oh, it's 24.
Year 24. Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
we do have Arden from Todd Groundwater to provide that update. Arden, can you?
No, that's all I needed. I know we're running late on time, so if that's the case, then thank you.
Thank you. And in our Watermaster engineer report later in this meeting, we do have a brief overview of our budget for this year and next year, or our contract components that we can provide.
Great, thank you.
So sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just thought it was more like a review because, as you can see, I highlighted a lot of different things, but there's definitely something, and I don't know exactly when we discussed them, but things that I can see that depending on costs, whether we can do all these things, and or if there's things like website administration or creating a fact section on the website that, some of our other districts could help with, and of course, grants, same thing. If we were all looking at grants and we have grant writers, and that's something that we would put forth that which we would want to do anyways, because you get support from all the agencies and stuff. So in reviewing too, it's just like really a lot to take in and really look at, but I, on the other hand, don't want to just say, go do do it all and have you put in extra time and extra work in something, but there is quite a few things that you added on, and we're already at a standstill with our budget. And so seeing all those new things, it would be wonderful, but we already know our wish list is going to have a lot crossed off for the simple fact that we can't afford it. So already I know we're going to have to be more creative in how we're going to get stuff done if we're going to want to do some of these things, which very, very important to me is making those compliant and getting some of those fees for the ones that aren't paying, and not have all this burden and stress on the ones that are paying and following. And that is just something very, very important. And if we did them too, our level of importance might be different to every single one of us here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I wanted to say on that. But sorry, I didn't mean to not give you the proper opportunity to let people weigh in before I went on. So I just don't want you to think I tried to rush you or anything. So with that, are we able to?
I'm good.
Yeah,
And I just say very briefly, I think you'd want to handle the Todd groundwater matter like you did Hallmark with a closed session, which I'd suggest be in October as the review session in terms of their performance.
Okay, well, with that, we will go. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Thanks. Okay, so I think this ties nicely to our ad hoc committee. And I wonder, I don't think we actually came to a conclusion on how we want to advise. They'll come back and tell us that recommendation. But I think this is what I was referring to earlier in the meeting with, I think we need to give them some marching instructions. To me, this is the list. And I wonder, I looked at Hallmark a little bit as our administrator. This list, having been in my kids' classroom for back to school night recently, there's must-dos and may-dos, right? And I wonder if you might help us with items that you feel are, I won't call them priorities, but there are things in there that we cannot function without. Every advisory committee meeting, I always go back to, hey, I need help interpreting these documents. I can't just look at invoices and understand. Derek's brought up, oh gosh, it just left my mind. Separating the restricted funds from the general funds, right? Those things to me are like non-negotiable. So if that makes sense, that would be a request. And I'll leave it to you and Jim. But I plan to advise on what I think are the priorities. That's it. Thank you.
Jim, would you like to respond?
No, we'd be happy to provide a staff assessment of relative importance or relative urgency.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
All right. Okay. With that, we'll go to 14, consideration and possible action on groundwater banking and recovery storage program. This is our report by our engineer.
Hi, good morning. This is Arden from Todd Groundwater. We have prepared a presentation. Are y'all able to see the, oh, I need to share my screen. That is the, oh.
I was just going to say, I see the item.
Yes. Okay, please let me know if the full page PowerPoint is showing right now.
No.
No? Alrighty. Let me try a different screen. Alright.
There we go.
Okay. And do you see the one with the notes or the full presentation?
The notes.
Okay.
Both.
How is it now?
There we go.
Just
Okay.
the picture.
Fantastic. Great. So this is in consideration of the High Desert Water Bank Storage Agreement. And And so this is the fourth storage agreement that the board has considered in the Watermaster history. And so I'm going to give a presentation kind of giving a brief review of what are the storage agreements, and then providing a review of the high desert water bank details. And then I'll walk through the material injury analysis that the Watermaster engineer did in order to develop the storage agreement for this project. So first, a review of storage agreements. So the rules and regulations, chapter 9, were developed thoughtfully by the council and the board and the engineer to figure out what do we really need to consider when there's a large project in the basin that may affect the groundwater and may affect other parties in the basin, to make sure that material injury is not occurring. And by material injury, this is the term in the judgment that refers to any physical harm to the basin or conditions that may negatively affect other parties or producers in the basin. And we'll walk through at the end of this presentation all of the different types of material injury that we look out for in the storage agreements or in any sort of application review to ensure that the material injury is not occurring. So the storage agreements are formed through several steps. First, the applicant submits an application that introduces what is the project and what different forms of potential material injury have been considered and why this project is not expected to cause material injury. And they provide documentation to back that up. In this case, there was a CEQA review, which we'll get into in a bit, and a model that was developed to show different scenarios to test for material injury. And so the Watermaster engineer reviews these documentations, and we write a memo that describes the project, describes our overall review, and whether, in our expert opinion, if it fulfills the requirements that it will not cause material injury or material injury can be mitigated. This memo then goes to the Watermaster Council, and they develop the legal storage agreement. And both the legal storage agreement and our memo are included in the packet this month. And then there have been 3 previous storage agreements approved by the Watermaster. That's Upper Amargosa Creek Recharge Project, Little Rock Creek Irrigation District Recharge, and Rosamond Community Services District Recharge. And I recognize that some of the board members and also any attendees may not have been present or active in the board during these previous storage agreements. So please let us know if you've got any questions about kind of what this entails. So with that, I'll get into a description of the High Desert Water Bank project. This is in the West Antelope subarea, and this project is a partnership between ABEC and Metropolitan Water District. So what's being recharged in this project are water that's coming from the State Water Project, which is south of the project in the California Aqueduct. And this is water that belongs to Metropolitan, but ABEC is facilitating the recharge in the High Desert Water Bank. And so during wet periods, up to 70,000 acre feet per year is proposed to be recharged at this project and then recovered during dry periods. And the maximum anticipated storage is 280,000 acre feet. So that would be 4 consecutive years, recharging the maximum amount without recovering any to reach that volume. So the application included a description of the facility and operations. There are 632 acres of recharge area, and in this water bank, there are 27 recovery wells. These range from 1,300 to 4,300 gallons per minute each for the proposed or projected recovery rate with an average of 2,300 gallons per minute each. So these are pretty sizable wells. And they're also monitoring wells located in the project, as well as monitoring that will be done from the recovery wells. And there are nested piezometers in the area, which show conditions at different depths. And this is also useful for water quality. One very important requirement and aspect of this project is that the total recovery is limited to 90% of the total water recharged. So that means for every 100 acre feet that are recharged and infiltrated into the basin, then 90 of those acre feet can be pumped out and recovered. So that means.
I have a question.
Can I interrupt that?
Yes, absolutely.
Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, so this has been a point of conversation to many of the constituents that I talk to, and this recovery limited to 90% of recharge water. So what you just described is it calculates out any evapotranspiration that takes place, and it is actual water going into the basin, and 10% of that is being left behind. Is that correct?
No, because it does not include evaporation. So
okay, so that is very different than what you just described and what you have on the slide. You said what goes into the basin.
Okay, I will jump ahead to our reduction of groundwater storage material injury note. And yeah, I apologize for stating that was what goes into the basin. It's what is recharged into the facility.
Okay, and Arden, I'm not meaning to be argumentative. It's just something that I think we've assumed, and this being our fourth project, I think there's many of us that have a misunderstanding of actually what's taking place in these recharge programs. So, it's concerning, and I think we potentially need a deeper dive into how we think about recharge and making sure we're not negatively impacting the basin because of, I just assumed the 5% recharge. I don't know, from what my time I've spent in the valley, depending on the time of the year, the winds, that can be way more than evapotranspiration of 5%. And so I really love to dig in on that and on this as we deal with recharge programs.
Thank you. That's a good clarification. I will note that the 10% is standard in arid parts of California. And while the total evaporation can vary with winds and temperature, in general, the average is 5%. And it is very unlikely that the evaporation will, in an area that does have geologic properties conducive to recharge, will be greater than 10%.
Is that quantifiable? And do we have history of that? Because, I think about the spectrum of arid, locations, I would say that Antelope Valley is on the high spectrum of that. And I mean, because of solar and everything else, we know that. And we know it through wind, and being a farmer that's grown thousands of acres over there, I've seen what wind can do and the evapotranspiration that takes place. So relative to other arid, deserty locations that I've farmed in as well, it's significantly higher.
Okay, yeah, I will look into the range of evaporation rates in Antelope Valley.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Brandon, I know I cut you off. I don't know if you were going somewhere else.
I had a question on the wells. If you do the calculations on it, that's like 60,000 gallons a minute GPM capacity. That is an astonishing amount of pumping capacity. Do we have some information on placement of those wells as far as an assessment of what the drawdown might be? If you go fire up 60,000 gallons a minute of water, your drawdown is going to be significant on the west side.
Yes. So part of the application did include a modeling report that was done by Montgomery and Associates. And in our review of the application, we did review the modeling documentation. And so this model did place the wells in their respective locations relative to the water bank and show at maximum recovery rate what the water levels would be throughout the area.
And that was what?
I will get to that in a little bit in the presentation.
Okay, no problem.
At least respective to surrounding wells.
Okay.
Thank you. Any additional questions before I continue? I'm hoping that many of the questions will be answered later in the presentation as well.
Okay. Let's see.
Thank you. So one of the big concerns that we look at is recharge water quality. And there have been several studies that looked at the suitability of using State Water Project water for recharge in the West Antelope Valley subarea. This includes the Salt and Nutrient Management Plan and the Antelope Valley Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. In general, the State Water Project water has a much lower salinity level than the West Antelope subarea. On average, the State Water Project is 273 milligrams per liter, and the water in West Antelope subarea is about 400 milligrams per liter. And I couldn't find any examples of really the West Antelope subarea water, especially in this region, having a lower salinity than the State Water Project. One of the items that's noted in the application and the CEQA documentation is that the State Water Project has lower arsenic levels than the native groundwater in this area. So they range from about 8 to 20 parts per billion in this area underlying the project, while the State Water Project is about 5 parts per billion on average. And so this facility does require treatment of, or likely will require treatment of water with higher arsenic levels that is recovered from the basin before it's returned to the California aqueduct. And with the application, the 2 studies that were submitted by ABEC include a California Environmental Quality Act, or a CEQA initial study that looked through all of the potential impacts that this could cause and tried to identify ways that this project could cause environmental impacts. And they adopted a mitigated negative declaration, which means that there were ways that this project could potentially cause with higher arsenic levels to the California aqueduct if the water isn't treated. And then they also included the modeling report from the High Desert Water Bank. So this report included in-depth field exploration, such as looking at the geology and water quality with depth at each of the locations where the wells were put in and the monitoring well and piezometer locations, and then incorporating that data into the model. So the model served a few purposes. It projected the total recharge capacity of the area. So answering the question, can this facility recharge the proposed 70,000 acre feet per year and potentially over 4 years, the 280,000 acre feet total proposed volume? And can that be extracted by the wells, the 70,000 acre feet per year, if needed? And then what does that do to the water levels in the area? And one thing that we found very important is that they considered what will happen to the water levels in surrounding domestic wells. And I'll get to that later when we walk through our material injury analysis. They also looked at arsenic levels with depth and modeled the distribution of arsenic. And so the modelers at Todd Groundwater, we're not provided a copy of this model, but we reviewed the documentation in detail and found that the model was consistent with industry practices and that the assumptions that were made in it were reasonable. So now I'm going to walk through the material injury analysis that we conducted and reported in our memo. The main items that we're really concerned about with a project like this, as Director Calandry mentioned, the lowering of groundwater levels is really the primary concern for this project, because there are some powerful wells that are pumping at high capacities, and we need to understand how that's going to affect the water levels regionally, and if there's any adverse impacts to neighboring wells. We also look at the reduction of groundwater in storage, which is that slide that I showed earlier, where we do have our estimates of the evaporation versus the 10% of total applied water that is not pumped. The degradation of groundwater quality, land subsidence, impacts to natural recharge, and liquefaction. And I'll just note that the last three are of lesser concern than the first three for the amount of attention and detail that we paid to them. So first is lowering of groundwater levels. In the picture that is shown here, this was provided in the modeling report. And this shows the locations of the monitoring wells and the production wells on site, as well as the domestic wells that are to the east of the project. And I want to call attention to the three red wells on to the east of this. We do want to note that there are two Tejon Ranch irrigation wells that are on the project site. Because they're on the project site and Tejon Ranch was in communication with ABEC throughout the legal storage agreement development process, we did not pay as much attention to the Tejon Ranch wells as we did to the domestic wells to the east of the project, because Tejon Ranch and ABEC have been in conversation, and they've been active in helping define the legal elements of the storage agreement. And so one thing that was very useful for our evaluation of the lowering of groundwater levels is that the high desert water bank model projected how 2 years of recharge at 35,000 acre feet per year, and then 1 year of recovery at 70,000 acre feet per year would affect water levels in these nearby wells. So I want to focus on the closest well, which I have the red box around. This plot shows the recharge over 2 years on the left side, and you can kind of see the water levels increasing with mounding as the recharge occurs. There's a little lag period, which is expected. We wouldn't expect that immediately after recharge, then we would start recovering, just because generally the recharge is occurring in wet periods, and then the recovery would be occurring in dry periods. But we can see that at the end of recovery, recovering the 70,000 acre feet in 1 year, that there would be a net decrease of 35 feet in the well that is immediately to the east. And so we spoke to ABEC about this. 35 feet, depending on the construction of this domestic well, which we don't know what the construction is, it could cause some issues. It also may not. It really requires on communication with the well owner to make sure that material injury, negative effects are not occurring for that well owner. So AVEC is in communication with that well owner. Prior to submitting the application, they were in contact with them and working directly with them. And what we found very important is that AVEC has agreed that mitigation to prevent this well going dry or having excess costs to produce from this well may involve shutting off nearby wells or reducing the total amount of recovery. And we thought it was important to note that the judgment does say, if fully mitigated, material injury shall no longer be considered to be occurring. So this is a case where there is a potential for material injury, but there are measures in place that in order to have mitigation and monitoring is important, and communication with these well owners are very important to make sure that any potential material injury is mitigated.
So Arden, I have a question for legal on that. Craig, if we approve something like this and we run the neighbor's well dry, where's the liability stand?
I see that hand.
While I appreciate him volunteering.
Yeah. No, I mean, if there's well interference and a drawdown and damage to a neighbor's well, that's causally connected to our activities, the activities of the storage parties. There's liability there.
For us.
Yes.
Craig, this is Jim Markman. You mind if
I think it's more direct for the parties that have caused the damage. I mean, if the project we're approving causes material injury and damage down the line, there's potential liability. Has to be.
Okay.
So can I speak to this for AVEC, please? Jim Markman, General Counsel.
Jim Markman, AVEX Legal Counsel.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you? How's everybody? So we've addressed this directly about the 3 wells or 3 or 4 or 5 wells that were in play, particularly 2 that were in play that are owned by Cajon Ranch. So we have addressed this 2 ways. First, we invited Cajon Ranch into the contract and made them a party to the contract for the purposes of those wells being protected should this ever show up. So we agreed, we would agree to work with them if we see, we're going to have a monitoring program, mitigation program on this and other subjects that's required to be done as between us, the Watermaster, and Cajon Ranch in 6 months. In addition, if we get down the line and we actually see any well interference that could pop up, then we have to take a look, slow down, and apply our mitigation program to avoid those damages coming. So essentially, AVEC has taken the responsibility to do that. The Watermaster, of course, is in play and can disagree with us on how it should be approached. And if there's any such disagreement, it goes directly to the court for disposition. So we have actually, which has never happened, I don't think, put Cajon Ranch in contractual position the same as the Watermaster and AVEC in order to deal with this problem with all the interested parties involved. And hopefully, years from now, this won't happen anyway. But if it does, we've got it surrounded. And under these circumstances, with the court having the last say and having Cajon and the Watermaster be able to give contractual input and make demands on AVEC, it's going to finally be the court's decision on how to dispose of that. And I don't know how the Watermaster could be more protected.
I appreciate those comments, and I see Miss Martin up here ready to give us a perspective from Cajon Ranch. So if you're done, we'll go ahead and yield the floor to her.
Sure.
This is Angelica Martin from Cajon Ranch. And as a follow-up to Jim's comment, AVEC has committed to present Cajon an agreement to mitigate and monitor these 2 wells, and it will be presented to Cajon within 60 days. So I would like that to be on record. And hopefully, we have a very good relationship, so this will work out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm thinking I would sure like to see an indemnity agreement for the Watermaster subject to this approval at the very least.
So, all right, this is Derek. I have a question. Kathy, when you have a minute.
Okay, go ahead, Derek.
I go. Oh, great. Thank you. So I heard something and may have misunderstood Mr. Markman, but he said we will participate in dealing with the mitigation. And I looked at Craig, And, my understanding of the judgment and our responsibility at ABAC is we are responsible for mitigation, right? Or making sure that does not happen from the court. So I want to make sure I'm not interpreting, this is legal, wording versus actual responsibility and how procedurally that would happen. So I look at Craig.
Darren, say again your comment about mitigation and the judgment.
Yeah. So, and Mr. Markman may correct me, but it said we would, from what I heard is if there's mitigation that needs to take place, we would be part of that conversation versus my understanding of the judgment is, aren't we supposed to be responsible to make sure mitigation, that there isn't material injury and that we are the ones advising how that mitigation takes place versus being a party to.
Well, let me clear that. If I made it ambiguous, let me try to clear that up. We have two things happening in this agreement. In 60 days, at our expense, this was a Watermaster's initial condition on all this. We're going to have to deliver a well monitoring and mitigation program that actually deals with the whole project, but specifically hones in on this issue with Tejon Ranch. So we're going to present the program, I'm sure. The program itself, which is abstract because we don't have a circumstance of potential damage to look at, is going to draw in, I'm sure, comments from the Watermaster and Tejon Ranch, and we will ultimately adopt one that's acceptable to both. So, and if we ever have a circumstance in the field where we're recognizing potential damage, then that has to be addressed too. And I'm sure all three parties, if involved, would work on that. The Watermaster, we understand, might issue a direction or an order or make a decision that says do this or do that. So all I've said is that's appealable to the court. Like any other Watermaster decision, it's appealable to the court. The Watermaster is the arm of the court in regulating, but certainly some decision they could have a significant impact on the operation of a $400 million water bank is appealable. I don't think we would come to that. We would probably all agree on what should be done, hopefully well in advance of any injury occurring. So that's all I meant. We understand the Watermaster would have jurisdiction to make a first decision after everybody confers. But again, that would be appealable if it wasn't acceptable to the operator. And that's not just AVAC. The other water banks also could run into a problem in future operation. The Watermaster could make a decision, issue a corrective order, and that might be appealed by them. We just don't know.
But you're correct, Eric, that we have an independent duty as Watermaster Board to protect the health of the basin and to prevent material injury. That is clear as can be from the judgment's terms. I think what Mr. Mark was saying is that there's an effort to guard against that through a mitigation monitoring system and other provisions in the agreement to prevent that from happening. But if it does, there are remedies. And true that there's appeal to the court for that, but there are remedies to prevent the harm to the basin that is detected at some point. We'd have a duty to do it.
Great, and I thank both of you for explaining that. And I think it's very important, as you pointed out, the economics of this and the size and scale of what it does, the benefits as well as the potential, during dry years, the potential impact. And, I'm wanting to make sure I understand before going to, any type of decision that, how it's looked and what's been done, what's not have been done. And, I understand and value a recharge program. It's very, abundant in, the west side of Kern County, in the Kern Basin. So thank you for that clarification.
Are there any additional questions about water levels? Or are we good to continue on? All right. So now we're on reduction of groundwater storage. So in our material injury analysis, we found that this will not result in a reduction of storage. The only form of water loss that we could identify is loss to evaporation. And Director Urosic, I will follow up with you about the range and different conditions of evaporative losses in the basin after this meeting. If 10% of the total applied water is left behind to compensate for the losses, we anticipate with an assumed 5% loss to evaporation that about 5% of the applied water would then be contributing to the valley. So if there are 70,000 acre feet that are applied, that could be about 3,500 acre feet left behind, contributing to the total storage in the valley, or in the basin. And would also like to note that the 10% is the standard for other water banks that are in the basin, and we have not seen, with the exception of when water levels are taken in seasons where there's active recovery, declines in water levels near the other banks. We've seen overall increases in water levels surrounding the banks in the valley, which leads us to believe that the 10% of applied water that's left behind is sufficient to contribute to net recharge, or I'm sorry, to net storage related to the water banks. The third material injury concern is groundwater quality degradation. And I kind of discussed this earlier when we were considering the state water project water quality in comparison to the ambient groundwater quality in the West Antelope subarea. And in general, the state water project water has lower salinity and lower arsenic content than the ambient groundwater. One note that we did have regarding monitoring and potential mitigation is that we encourage more frequent, potentially quarterly, groundwater quality monitoring in the domestic wells. Even though the water that is being applied has lower arsenic, if you kind of imagine this big mound of water coming into a basin where there's a high level of heterogeneity in arsenic contents, different arsenic levels with different depths, different geochemical conditions with different depths, that's kind of going to move around a lot of water. And so even though the water that is being recharged into the water bank has lower arsenic levels than the native groundwater, it could be pushing water from a different part of the aquifer that has slightly higher arsenic levels to where those wells are pumping from. That being said, we were told by AVEC that the domestic well owners were not really interested at this time in domestic well water quality sampling. So we encourage them to understand what are the current water quality conditions in those domestic wells. But we also recognize that we want to protect the privacy and preferences of those well owners. So the last three concerns are first, land subsidence. So we—
Arden, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to back up on one. You keep talking about arsenic. We've had problems in the valley of cadmium, mercury, and different levels over the years. Have they tested for other heavy metals?
I don't know off the top of my head what the—
I can jump in here, Arden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, arsenic is the, we've tested for all the various constituents.
Okay.
And the only one that's jumped out is exceeding the MCL is arsenic.
Okay.
And that's associated with the pump-in program. Arden reported earlier the range that we're seeing for arsenic is between 8 and 20 parts per billion. And there are certain requirements for the water that's pumped out and returned to the aqueduct
Yeah.
to stay under the 10 parts per million.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
and that's why we plan to provide treatment to remove arsenic prior to pumping.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Sorry, Arden, you can continue.
Oh, no problem. These are good questions. So I appreciate that, you're asking questions, engaged, and I'm happy to either provide any additional information that's useful to you, or I'm sure there's plenty of folks in the audience who can help provide that information. So the next material injury concern is land subsidence. So the risk of land subsidence is negligible, and that's because the groundwater levels are not anticipated to be low enough to depressurize clay layers. So when there is the recharge, there is considerable mounding. So the water levels are increasing prior to the recovery. And though the water levels do decline during the recovery process, we do not anticipate that they will get beneath historical lows. And you really need production, a significant amount of production beneath the historical low to depressurize the clay layers and cause permanent land subsidence. The next concern is impact to natural surface water recharge. And we did not find that any natural surface water recharge beyond the small amount of precipitation is occurring in this area and or would be adversely impacted. The last consideration is liquefaction, and this was noted in the CEQA initial study. And also I wanted to note that the CEQA documentation and the modeling documentation are posted on the Antelope Valley Watermaster website below the meeting. We made them available for public record and review, but it was about 1,000 pages of documentation. So we didn't want to put that in the packet for y'all because that's a lot. But the CEQA initial study identified liquefaction beneath the California aqueduct as a potential hazard. And they put an alert level at 75 feet below ground surface beneath the aqueduct. And I don't have off the top of my head what the static water levels are, but this represents a pretty significant mounding, an increase in the water levels related to the recharge. And there's a monitoring plan in place to ensure that the water levels do not get above this level beneath the recharge. They've identified the nested piezometers and recovery well HD 22, which will have a transducer in it, as the monitoring wells to kind of sound this alert if the water levels get above 75 feet below ground surface near the aqueduct. And this was modeled in the high desert water bank groundwater model. And it did show that the proposed facilities are unlikely to have the groundwater levels rise to this level with the constraints of 70,000 acre feet per year of recharge and the maximum of 280,000 acre feet of total recharge.
And Arden, before you move on, just Matt, just to clarify something there. So regarding the static water level, the water level that we're seeing now before any recharge is about 280 feet below ground surface. So 250 to 280 feet. And on the comment number 5 there regarding natural surface flows, the project was designed to not impede surface flows out there from both Hatchbees and St. Gabriel Mountain. So project was designed to allow those surface flows to continue through the project, and we're not capturing that as part of the recharge project. So just wanted to bring those two things up. Thank you, Arden.
Thank you for providing these details. Was there a comment from somebody else?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. As mentioned, in relation to the wells from Tajon Ranch, there is a monitoring plan that AVEC will be submitting. This was specified in the CEQA documents. They outlined the development of a groundwater monitoring plan. And an original memo, it says to give the plan within 6 months, but it sounds like it's been shortened to 60 days after approval. And this will outline what are the monitoring mechanisms and reporting requirements, the frequencies for both groundwater levels and groundwater quality monitoring. And the requirement of this monitoring plan is included in the legal storage agreement. So in conclusion, taking all of these considerations of material injury, Todd Groundwater compiled a list of recommendations that we believe are necessary in order to help us best monitor to make sure that material injury is not occurring and to help mitigate any risks of material injury. So the first one is that recovery is limited to 90% of total water recharged. And I'll note per our discussion, by recharged, we mean water that is applied and not necessarily the water that makes it beneath the ground surface. The next is that, as stated, recovery is limited to 70,000 acre feet per year annually, and the total volume of storage is limited to 280,000 acre feet total. All recovery wells are in compliance with the Watermaster metering and testing guidelines. That they report the total amount of stored water on the annual production reporting forms, and also that each year AVEC is submitting an annual water storage and recovery report. The next is that AVEC prepares that monitoring plan and provides it to the Watermaster and also adheres to it. And if groundwater levels are within 75 feet below ground surface beneath the aqueduct, that recharge quantities are reduced. The AVEC regularly monitors groundwater quality at the site and also at the surrounding domestic wells, provided that the owners are okay with that. And that AVEC remains in communication with nearby well owners and provides mitigation measures. And this is recognizing that mitigation may mean reducing or stopping recovery at certain times. So with that, that is all I have for the Watermaster engineer's review of the storage agreement, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Well, do me a favor, Arden, put that last slide back up.
Yes.
And leave that there for a minute while we discuss this.
Absolutely.
Is there any public comments on this? Or questions from the public?
Not seeing any online.
Okay, and discussion?
Eric, do you have anything?
Throwing me first. Sure. I do have a couple. So I think, Arden, thank you. Well prepared. I know AVEC, has done a lot of work on this, and I think the opportunity for the value to this basin is significant. I just want to make sure. This is my first time as a board member dealing with a recharge program, and especially the size and the magnitude of this. I want to make sure I'm digging in as much and seeing a lot of this information for the first time. So I do have concerns about recovery. It's limited to 90% because I don't think that's a true statement. And you've qualified it, Arden. Thank you for that. But I think we need to all be aware of it, not just for this project, but for the other three that we as a board approved in the past. I guess I have a question so far as the size and magnitude of this. How is the extraction of this water going to be taking place? Is this just 100% pump out? Is there thoughts or plans to transfer water? And then I really, if so, how how will the engineer evaluate those water transfers, around the entire basin versus just where this is located on the west side? Would be, my two big things. And my third point, and I know, I've had three here, is my third one is mitigation plan. From what I understand, that's still to be negotiated with the parties, whether those are the private domestic wells or Tajon. So my understanding is we're looking for an approval without those plans being negotiated and finalized. So I just looked to counsel about our exposure on that. So,
Eric, I have a question on that. You think we could do something on a motion that's contingent upon those approvals? Are those?
Well, I could add that it's already a condition in the agreement.
It is a condition.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you say that, can you explain that condition of the agreement? With whom? The Watermaster or with the parties?
Both. With both.
Okay, great, thank you. Maybe the other two questions, the one so far is extraction.
Yeah, I could
Matt,
add,
that'd be great.
provide the option to do the water via exchange, but that, like I said, that's an option, but the envisioned operation is to physically pump back and return their water to the aqueduct.
And Matt, on those exchanges, I'm assuming, kind of District 40 or other LA, and I don't know the technicality of how that structure is. Will those be reviewed, as an exchange coming into the Watermaster for all the analysis that the engineers do and approval by the Watermaster?
You want me to?
Well, when I talk of exchange, it would simply be between AVAC and Metropolitan. It would not include any of our retail customers. So AVAC would exchange our table A and then take ownership of the stored water in the basin. Does that make sense?
Is it in the same location that table A is being recharged?
Yes. Yeah, that was the concern that Cajon had, right? Is that we're not recharging here at the High Desert Water Bank and then recovering somewhere else, or vice versa. So
exactly, that's what I'm trying to dig into as well. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay.
I want to thank David for stepping up in regional water. It's a huge step towards water reliability, towards management of the basin, and I'm really happy to see it.
Thank you. I'll pass that along to the board. They have good vision. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we have to decide what action we are
I do,
taking.
Craig, I apologize. What about our liability as far as an indemnity agreement goes, like we've done in other cases?
I haven't.
Yes, we have. Right, Simon.
Yeah, we've done indemnities in other matters, but particularly in transfers. We have a long history of getting indemnities on that. I think in this situation, we feel that there's enough protections built into the agreement that we have as much incentive to mitigate and make the problems minimal if they occur, and to reduce our liability, but we do not have an indemnity. That was not negotiated. It's not been a part of storage agreements in the past that I'm aware of.
What's your recommendation? You telling me we're fine or look to get?
Our recommendation is from the legal side whether this is consistent with the terms of the judgment.
Okay.
And I can tell you that we believe it is.
Okay, that's what I needed to hear.
Okay.
I do have, can I have one more question? I'm sorry. So
no problem.
you're going to evaluate Arden at 10%. are you, then your recommendation is you do not feel that at any point this is going to negatively impact the basin, and that in no way we have evapotranspiration that could allow to go negative. I guess that's what I'm asking. So if some point in time we come back and say, why are we going negative? And, it's recharge programs. I'd hate everyone to, have to deal with this later versus addressing it now.
From my perspective, I do not expect that the evaporation will exceed 10%. I will look into those numbers more, but the only circumstance I can really think of would be if there's significant clogging and the water just isn't infiltrating in time. And then that wouldn't be a very good recharge project. And I can't imagine that AVEC would let the facilities get to that.
All right, so describe to me clogging.
It's just when there's bacterial or some sort of buildup beneath the area where the water is infiltrating, and then the sediments aren't really able to pass through water very easily because it gets clogged. The little pore spaces in between all the sediments are filled. But we looked through the lithology that was described in the physical analyses, the geologic studies that were in the Montgomery Associates report. And the sediments are pretty coarse in the shallower areas that could have a potential for clogging. And so we do not anticipate that's going to be an issue in this facility.
Okay, and then just for going forward, based upon how you are looking at leave behind, it's truly a net leave behind of you're going to do more evaluation, but what it represents is really 5%. So the 10% number that I've had in my head is truly a 5% number.
Yes, I would say realistically, we can expect that it's about 5% net increase in storage from the total amount of applied water.
Okay. Thank you.
Derek, does Matt. So maybe if you look on page 2 of the storage agreement, page 2, section 2, where it talks about project losses, I think it's defined clear in that language where it says applicant shall be entitled to a credit of 90% of the water delivered versus.
No, and I appreciate that.
Recharge.
Yeah, and I would just say I'll say my ignorance, I've always assumed that to be what's in the ground, and I think that's my concern, and I may be the only one that has that misinterpretation of what 10% meant. So just bring that up because I know I don't, because other landowners have brought that up to me as well, that they assume that. So thanks for calling that out again, Matt.
Derek, you and I were in the same boat on that.
Yeah. And that's not calling out, I want to make sure that's not calling out AVEC project. It's just water banking in general. And this is the first one I've dealt with. And, I want to make sure there's transparency in this decision.
But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't look like there's going to be a negative number for the basin. So it is.
Okay, any other questions? Are we at a point where someone will have a motion? Okay, I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this item?
No public comment online.
Okay, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Chair McLaren?
Yes.
Director Bryden?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
I am going to vote yes, but clarifying that if it comes back to that we do have an issue with this 10% and evapotranspiration, I think we need to address this as a board.
and Director Nutson,
Yes.
and that passes.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to go to item number 15. Consideration and possible action on new production application, and that will be a staff report by our engineer.
Hi, this is Arden with Todd Groundwater again. So we are considering a new production application from Kevin Williams. He is requesting 1 acre-feet per year of new production in the West Antelope sub-area. This parcel is located near the Willow Springs International Raceway, and he is wanting the 1 acre-foot per year for 2 private storage units for his private use that are each 2,560 square feet, and each storage unit will have a half bathroom. He is not anticipating to have any landscaping. This is really just for the domestic use of these storage units. And Todd Groundwater finds the potential for material injury as defined by the judgment to be negligible because of the low volume of water that is being proposed. And the advisory committee unanimously recommended this application for approval. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
No, I'd like to make a motion to approve R2374.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
All right. Do we have any public comments on that motion?
Not seeing any online.
Okay. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair McLaren,
Yes.
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandry,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
and Director Nutson.
Yes.
And I see that Jim Beck has his hand raised. Sorry, Jim, we cannot hear you.
Jim, shake your head. Do you need to speak?
Can you finish the vote?
You did.
We did.
Jim, you can try texting me your comment. We'll move on to the next one for sake of time.
Okay. And now we will go to item number 16, consideration and possible action on transfer application.
So this transfer application is for 100 acre-feet of carryover water from Jeff and Nancy Siebert to Antelope Valley Water Trust. And the Sieberts have a parcel in the West Antelope sub-area, and Antelope Valley Water Trust does not have any particular parcels associated with their production rights. They currently have 49 acre-feet per year in permanent production rights. And in the beginning of 2023, they had 100 acre-feet of carryover water and then transferred that 100 acre-feet to Tudor Perini Corporation in April of this year. So this 100 acre-feet of carryover water would be used by Antelope Valley Water Trust for investment purposes, and it is not affiliated with a particular point of extraction at this time. Because there's not a particular point of extraction, we were unable to conduct a material injury analysis. And so Todd Groundwater recommends this for approval under the condition that Antelope Valley Water Trust must submit a new point of extraction application prior to using this water so that a material injury analysis can be conducted, or it can be passed through a subsequent transfer. And the advisory committee unanimously recommended this application for approval. Are there any questions?
No. Vice Chair McLaren, I move that R2375 be approved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. Do I have any public comments on this item?
Not seeing any online.
Okay. With that, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Chair McLaren,
Yes.
Director Bryden,
Yes.
Director Calandry,
Yeah.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
Director Knudsen,
Yes.
and that passes.
Okay.
Hey, Josh, can you hear me now?
Yes, Jim, we can hear you.
Vice Chair McLaren, if I could make or two comments.
Sure.
I was so excited about all the groundwater banking talk. It was taking me back to my old days. I got excited and I hit the wrong button on my computer, so apologize for that, but I enjoyed the presentation. I'm sorry, but I have to drop off of the meeting today. I have some scheduled fun in Pittsburgh that I need to get to. Josh will be continuing in the meeting, and pending your outcome in closed session, I'm sure he'll be able to give me an update. But I appreciate the opportunity to participate remotely today. Thanks, board, and thanks everyone.
All right. Okay, now we will go back. Number 17.
And we have nothing further to report.
Okay. That was short and quick.
That one.
Yes. Number 18 is the Watermaster's engineer's report.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again, and hopefully I'll get the right one up this time. Okay. Alrighty. Oh, I did not. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
We can see it.
Yes.
Excellent. So this was our Watermaster engineer's report. We are starting with how we traditionally start these reports, with a summary of our new production and qualified small pumpers. Last month, we approved an additional 2 acre-feet per year with 2 individual 1 acre-foot per year applications, which puts us at 1,048.92 acre-feet per year in total new production approved, with the caveat that I believe about 215 or so of that total water is temporary, and when the 1 year term is up for the use, then that number will go down. Item B is our model update, and I'll invite Maureen to provide some information about our modeling efforts and where we're at.
Hi, so the modeling effort is a multi-year process, and I think most of you know that it's been going on since 2022. Todd Groundwater is updating and reviewing the existing model, bringing it into the present time with recent data, and really updating and documenting what's been done before. In 2022, we identified the deficiencies in the existing model and made a plan on how to fill those deficiencies. That's the ongoing process of this year. We've already updated the watershed runoff and subsurface inflow portions. We've extended the model to actually go all the way to the boundaries, and we're adding the wells in right now in those sub areas. We're also rebuilding the return flow distribution with recent data. We're building on the original return flow data done for the expert report for the adjudication, and again, bringing that into present time. That should be done by the end of this year. And then in 2024, we plan to calibrate and identify any other existing issues that might be with the model and how we can apply it to these material injury applications. So that's our brief update. We're on track and still working through all the details. Back to you, Arden.
Thanks, Maureen. The last item that we have is we were asked to give a bit of a contract update. So as it was mentioned earlier, our current contract is from 2022 through the end of 2024. And I want to give a little summary of the items that are included in that contract versus the items that are covered by other fees. So I kind of put what I think is the obvious for the Watermaster engineer first, which is the annual report. So this is to keep in compliance with the adjudication and with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And this annual report really includes our big analyses, looking at the changes in storage, the overall production throughout the year, keeping track of the items that have been added or changed in the Watermaster activities, to compile that and include in the report our water quality analyses, and taking together all of the information throughout the year and making sure that we are on track with our safe yield analyses. Throughout the year, we keep up with our water accounting, keeping track of who's got what water rights and how are those changing, how they change with transfers, and noting in our annual reporting or as production reports come in, which parties may be out of compliance, and coordinating with the administrator in regards to that. In our contract, this includes our model update. So this is specific to our particular 2022 to 2024 contract that we've been updating the previous USGS model and making it so it can be a tool that can really be utilized in the future in both our annual reports and safe yield analyses, but also be a tool that can be utilized in our application evaluations and determinations of material injury. Within our contract is work with metering and monitoring. The Watermaster engineer is the recipient of any new metering documentation that comes in from the approved installation specialists, as well as keeping track of the metering reports that come in. I'm going to take this moment to, as a friendly reminder, that parties are required to submit quarterly metering reports with photographs of their meters. If they're parties with, I believe it's 10 or greater acre feet per year permanent production rights, those reports include monthly metering values. And we're currently in the process of looking at the data that's been submitted over the past year and making sure that it's matching what is being reported from the annual production reports by the parties, just to make sure that, we appreciate everyone sending in their data, and we just want to double check and make sure that the numbers are matching up so that the folks who are reporting regularly and in compliance and being honest are recognized. And we're also wrapping our arms around, where are the gaps of the folks who, at this point, we don't have confirmation that they have meters on their wells, or who haven't been regularly reporting their metering, and thinking about future ways that we can make things a little bit easier for parties and also be more diligent within the budget to make sure that everything is on track with metering compliance. And then the last item, which is a pretty large bucket, is Watermaster issues and communication. This includes communication with council and admin staff when a viewpoint of understanding the physical. And with that, I invite any questions.
Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, now we will go to our general counsel report.
Issues will be covered in closed session. We had several pending matters, an appeal, a couple of hearings in the last month. I'll report on in closed session.
Okay. Now, number 20 is board members' requests for future agenda items. Is there any future agenda items requests?
Yeah, this is Derek.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead. So I'd like to add that, that we discussed the contract with Todd Groundwater at the next board meeting, and I don't know if that is closed or open, so I'll leave that to council.
Yeah, I think it'd be closed session.
Okay. Well, we have that notated for a future agenda item. My question to you is, are we doing a little break or are we going right into closed session?
2-minute break.
Okay, it sounds like we're going to be taking a short break and then we will go to closed session.